Hello, my name is Trey Hoverson. I designed this animated presentation to complement the theology outlined in The Health of the Whole. For the best individual experience, please review that PowerPoint presentation before proceeding. The static theology outlined throughout the presentation becomes dynamic as we observe how geometry and mathematics connect and propel us within this spiritual entity. This initial animation sequence will connect the life squared graph to the elements, emotions, and senses. On top, we see that W negative and W positive create the four elements of our shared reality. On the bottom, we see that S negative and S positive create the four senses that allow each individual to take in a unique experience. Note the three distinct intersections that are formed within the graph. The top and bottom lines create perceived boundaries. The mind is centered in between them. These boundaries allow each of us an individualized physical existence and create self-awareness. As the circles split vertically, observe the overlap and boundaries created between the mind, body, and spirit. Next, note the connections created as the circles fill in. S negative connects with S positive, joining masculine and feminine within the physical body. W negative connects with W positive, joining masculine and feminine within the spiritual body. S negative connects with W negative, joining the body and spirit on the masculine side. S positive connects with W positive, joining the body and spirit on the feminine side. Observe as triangular symmetry connects the body apex up through the middle of the spiritual boundary. Now, observe as triangular symmetry connects the spirit apex down through the middle of the physical boundary. These apex points split the spiritual and physical boundaries into masculine and feminine perspectives. Observe the symmetry as the circles fade in. They connect the blue and purple triangles. These connections create a larger perimeter arranged around a shared center point. That shared center point is found in our mind, and the larger perimeter formed defines whole awareness. Observe how the larger perimeter encircles the initial mind, body, and spirit graph. The spiritual and physical boundaries create two opposing triangles. These opposing triangles create the star of life. The next animation sequence pairs the star of life with the color spectrum found in nature. Red pairs with S negative. Orange pairs with S positive. Yellow pairs with W negative. Green pairs with W positive. Blue pairs with the apex of the physical body. Purple pairs with the apex of the spiritual body. Magenta pairs with the mind. Next, observe the blue and purple outlines created by the two overlapping large triangles. Note that S negative and S positive are a combination of 2 parts physical, blue outline, and 1 part spiritual, purple outline. Then note W negative and W positive are 2 parts spiritual, purple outline, and 1 part physical, blue outline. The body apex is 2 parts physical and 1 part spiritual. The spirit apex is 2 parts spiritual and 1 part physical. It is worth noting the correlation between the color-coded star of life and the chakra systems outlined by previous cultures. S negative pairs with the root chakra. S positive pairs with the sacral chakra. W negative pairs with the navel chakra. W positive pairs with the heart chakra. The body apex pairs with the throat chakra. The spirit apex pairs with the third eye chakra. The mind pairs with the crown chakra. As a final note, observe how W positive, our spiritual mother, is the heart or center of our shared physical and spiritual existence. Green is the middle point within the color spectrum and is found in the 4th position, regardless if you start on top or bottom. The next graph will introduce Plutonic solids and explain how they create paired views. Plutonic solids are symmetrical, 3-dimensional shapes. Only 5 Plutonic solid shapes are possible. The easiest way to think of each shape is to compare each one to a sphere. The closer its shape mirrors a sphere, the more efficient that shape would be. Efficiency is calculated by face-to-edge ratio. The cube is in the S negative position, the octahedron is in the S positive position. They share a base of 12 edges. A single tetrahedron can interface with a 12-edge base pair. The dodecahedron is in the W negative position, the icosahedron is in the W positive position. They share a base of 30 edges. 2 tetrahedrons form a stella octaangula, which can interface with either a 12 or 30 edge base pair. Plutonic solids can pair together to improve efficiency. Think of their contrast and shape as opposing perspectives. If they stay separate, they create an imbalance and inefficiency. When they integrate, they create balance. As they pair, their geometric shapes become more spherical. Their opposing perspectives connect and diversify, improving their overall efficiency. The cube is masculine. The octahedron is feminine. They form a 12-edged dual pair. The dodecahedron is masculine. The icosahedron is feminine. They form a 30-edged dual pair. A stella octaangula is formed from a dual pair of tetrahedrons, one masculine and one feminine. Note this dual self pair forms an 8-pointed star. Observe the inner blue triangle that points up. There would be an inner purple triangle on the reverse side that points down. In this two-dimensional diagram of the stella octaangula, imagine it as a trick coin with two heads. The coin would have a masculine head and a feminine head. The next animation shows how the plutonic solids pair together at the vertical apex of the body and spirit. A total of 6 shapes pair together, 3 masculine and 3 feminine. These shapes pair in 3 distinct planes. The first pair happens in the physical body between the cube and octahedron. The second pair happens in the spiritual body between the dodecahedron and icosahedron. The final pair happens between the tetrahedrons. They form the stella octaangula. This final pair integrates the physical and spiritual duality into a singularity. That singularity is the star of life that supports us all. Watch next as the stella octaangula centers and expands over the life squared graph. This expansion organizes and assigns each plutonic solid to a perspective within the star of life. Observe now as circles fill in, integrating the plutonic solids in order of least efficient to most efficient. First is the cube, second is the octahedron, third is the dodecahedron, fourth is the icosahedron, fifth is the completed male tetrahedron, sixth is the completed female tetrahedron. As they pair, a new shape, diameter, and perspective is added, improving overall efficiency. This next sequence will help you visualize self-awareness within the whole. We are a star within a star. The blue triangle labeled 7 represents physical self-awareness. Even though our individual physical design mirrors the spiritual whole, we feel separated within it. Each life experience creates a new understanding. When our understanding expands to the perimeter of self-awareness, we become aware that we are part of the whole. The next animation sequence will show how the plutonic solids interact to create the seasonal cycle. Each life squared perspective and color correlates to a season. W positive or green is winter. S positive or orange is spring. S negative or red is summer. W negative or yellow is fall. The numbers fading in correlate to the masculine and feminine shapes outlined in the previous animation. Numbers 1 through 4 are split into male and female views and paired with the corresponding plutonic solid assigned to that perspective. Note the edge labels 12 and 30 to remind you of size and efficiency of the plutonic solids. The next lines that fade in relate to the efficiency of plutonic solids based on their face to edge ratio. The cube has a 6 to 12 ratio, it's 50% efficient. The octahedron has an 8 to 12 ratio, it's 67% efficient. The dodecahedron has a 12 to 30 ratio, it's 40% efficient. The icosahedron has a 20 to 30 ratio, it's 67% efficient. The stark contrast in efficiency creates 2 magnetic poles that power the pendular movements that weave and turn these realities into one shared experience. The cube is the least efficient and creates the southern pole. The icosahedron is the most efficient and creates the northern pole. In our physical reality, this polarity difference creates Earth's tilt. This tilt is responsible for the solstices and equinoxes. 1 and 3 pair on the masculine side and influence the seasons in the southern hemisphere. 1 relates to the cube and 3 to the dodecahedron. They interact at the equinox position as they rotate clockwise around their individual triangles. 4 and 2 pair on the feminine side and influence the seasons in the northern hemisphere. 4 relates to the icosahedron and 2 to the octahedron. They interact at the equinox position as they rotate clockwise around their individual triangles. Observe how the clockwise rotation of the plutonic solids create counterclockwise rotation within the inner circle. Note how the dual pairs alternate between clockwise and counterclockwise influence. Each side of this graph has a pair of triangles equally divided into 4 colors. Remember, W positive or green is winter, S positive or orange is spring, S negative or red is summer, W negative or yellow is fall. Note how each color can be divided into 3 equal halves. These 3 halves correlate to the 3-month period within each season. The magnetic poles create the starting points for the seasonal cycles. In the southern hemisphere, the cube would start at the summer solstice. In the northern hemisphere, the icosahedron would start at the winter solstice. When the sequence begins, the cube moves left and the icosahedron moves right. They travel 1 month before turning upward and downward. After the turn, they move 2 months. The plutonic solids superimpose at the equinox. The 30 edge engulfs the 12 edge. This interaction allows an exchange in power. At the equinox position, physical and spiritual influence is reversed as the power shifts. In the southern, a 12 edge shifts power to a 30 edge. In the northern, a 30 edge shifts power to a 12 edge. This power exchange is like a relay point. One exchange powers up, the other powers down. This marks the start of the second season. The dodecahedron and octahedron move up and down 2 months. Then they turn right and left and travel 1 month. This brings us to the solstices and midway point of the cycle. This marks the start of the 3rd season. The dodecahedron and octahedron would continue towards the next equinox. Once again, at the equinox, the power shifts back to the cube and icosahedron. This marks the start of the 4th season. The cycle completes at the solstice positions and then repeats. The next animation sequence will explain how 360 degrees is divided into 24 equal perspectives, 12 based on physical influence and 12 based on spiritual influence. The first part of this sequence connects 6 circles around 1 circle. Note the 6 slender petals formed within the center circle and the 6 broader petals formed in the outer circle. If you connect the opposing petals, 12 physical perspectives are formed. The second part of this sequence shrinks the original 7 circles within the center circle. As this happens, they shift counterclockwise. Remember, W positive and S negative form the magnetic poles. They center within their quadrants. We now see a set of petals within a set of petals. This would correlate to the previous plutonic solid animation where a 30-edge pair engulfs a 12-edge pair. The larger slender petals intersect with the smallest circle to form 12 spiritual perspectives. The boxes that are fading in are color coordinated and will help you see how the directions of the compass are influenced and formed by the 12 physical and 12 spiritual perspectives. For simplicity, we will rotate north to the top of the graph. Note, the blue square correlates to the male tetrahedron and forms the cardinal directions north, east, south, west. The purple square correlates to the female tetrahedron and forms the primary intercardinal directions northeast, southeast, southwest, northwest. Recall that the male and female tetrahedrons are 4-sided triangular pyramids that pair together to form the stella octaangula, an 8-pointed star. On this graph, the blue and purple squares create 4 physical and 4 spiritual boundaries. Their 45-degree offset splits these 8 boundaries into 4 masculine and 4 feminine divisions. These divisions are influenced by the secondary intercardinal directions. The secondary intercardinal directions integrate physical and spiritual perspectives. The physical and spiritual perspectives relate to the 12-edge and 30-edge plutonic solids. North-northeast, east-southeast, south-southwest, west-northwest are formed by combining the physical feminine orange square with the spiritual feminine green square. Recall orange correlates to the octahedron and green to the icosahedron. North-northwest, east-northeast, south-southeast, west-southwest are formed by combining the physical masculine red square with the spiritual masculine yellow square. Recall red correlates to the cube and yellow to the dodecahedron. The months are created by the blue, red, and orange squares. Recall that these 3 colors correlate to the shapes of the completed male tetrahedron. These shapes create our shared physical reality. The astrological signs are created by the purple, yellow, and green squares. Recall that these 3 colors correlate to the shapes of the completed female tetrahedron. These shapes create our shared spiritual reality. As a final note, observe how physical and spiritual influence alternates, weaving these 2 realities into one shared experience. The next animation sequence will use the blue and purple squares to demonstrate the basic mathematics and geometry that create the space-time continuum. I have tilted the star so that February or north is in the up position. The divisions and orientation of this graph mirror that of the compass graph. The only difference is the outer numeric labels. Observe how the positive numbers organize in a clockwise direction and the negative numbers organize in a counterclockwise direction. Recall from the seasons graph that the plutonic solids rotate clockwise. They interact with the counterclockwise rotation of the inner circle. The counterclockwise rotation relates to Earth's rotation on its axis. Observe the movement patterns of the clock. Notice that for every 12 numeric position changes by the blue hand, the purple hand will move one numeric position clockwise, and the labels move one half a numeric position counterclockwise. Notice the pattern seen every time the blue and purple hand reset. They square up 4 times per full rotation. Because of the counterclockwise label movement, the purple hand moves 3.25 labels per rotation. If you multiply the distance of 3.25 by the 4 squared perspectives within that distance, you'll get a value of 13. This is significant and introduces the importance of negative and positive numbers. When you contrast the negative and positive numbers on this graph, you'll realize they all share a difference of 13. These 12 combinations of 13 create polarity differentials. Recall from the seasons graph that a power shift between a 12 and 30 edge plutonic solid creates a seasons change at the equinox positions. On this graph, the equinox power shifts occur at the 1 position. Note the first time the purple hand reaches 1, it intersects the Aries label. The second time it reaches 1, it intersects the Libra label. Here the energy is reversed to a negative influence. This influence continues through 6 numeric positions. Recall from the seasons graph that a seasons change also occurs at the solstice position. However, this exchange is less polarized because it happens between 2 plutonic solids that share a common edge ratio. On this graph, the solstice power shifts occur at the 7 position. Note the first time the purple hand reaches 7, it intersects the Capricorn label. The second time it reaches 7, it intersects the Cancer label. Here the energy is reversed to a positive influence. This influence continues through 6 numeric positions. It takes a 24-hour period for the labels to make a full rotation. That rotation influences each label to every combination of 13. Within that time period, 4 power shifts occur, 2 at the equinox points and 2 at the solstice points. This graph has been simplified. In truth, every plutonic solid contributes to a separate component of time. The cube relates to seconds, the octahedron to minutes, the dodecahedron to hours, the icosahedron to days, the body apex to weeks, the spirit apex to months, the stella octaangula to years. Just like in the rainbow arrangement, W positive, our spiritual mother, is the bond that links our physical and spiritual realities. She integrates the 3 smallest components of time into days. Days can then be integrated into the 3 largest components of time. The next graph is a modified view of the compass graph. Note that north is no longer centered on top. Capricorn and Cancer are the solstice points and form the vertical axis of the life squared graph. Aries and Libra are the equinox points and form the horizontal axis of the life squared graph. These intersections divide and organize the months and signs within the life squared perspectives. Each quadrant is made up of 3 months organized between 4 astrological signs. Capricorn, Aries, Cancer, and Libra form the primary intercardinal directions and connect adjacent quadrants. Observe the overlap between quadrants as the first month of each season transitions through the primary intercardinal directions. Note the first month always starts on the orange apex. The primary intercardinal directions connect the orange apex in the previous quadrant to the red apex in the new quadrant. These purple apex points start the new season. The cardinal directions connect the yellow apex and green apex in the new quadrant. These blue apex points end the season. Note the apex color sequence within each season: orange, purple, red, yellow, blue, green. This sequence mirrors the color pattern in the Star of Life graph. This perpetual pattern interconnects each quadrant. The end of one season creates the beginning of the next. Note that each season is comprised of 6 colors. Each color correlates to a specific plutonic solid shape. Multiply these 6 shapes by the 4 seasons and we get a value of 24. There are 24 separate perspectives formed within each year. The time and place of each birth blends the physical and spiritual influences that form each unique perspective. This complexity explains both individual and cultural diversity and creates the appearance of infinite perspectives. These 6 shapes also interconnect our realities. They pair together to form the mind, body, and spirit connection. The body is formed within the male tetrahedron by combining the cube and octahedron. They create the self-based physical perspective. The spirit is formed within the female tetrahedron by combining the dodecahedron and icosahedron. They create the whole-based spiritual perspective. The mind is formed by combining the male and female tetrahedrons. It allows each of us to balance these perspectives at an individual and collective level. Our current reality demands that we rebalance our minds. We must evolve our spiritual understanding before our self-based intentions consume us and our planet. Science has confirmed that we are running out of time. This spiritual revelation is our salvation. Previous cultures have left evidence that confirms that we are part of this spiritual entity. The most noteworthy is the Great Pyramid of Giza. Located in the center of Earth's landmass, its corners align with the primary inner cardinal directions. It mirrors the orientation of the purple or spiritual square. The four triangular faces of the pyramid align with the cardinal directions and create an astrological clock. This structure points our minds in the direction of whole-based spiritual understanding. Its apex connects all perspectives within the whole. The next animation sequence will demonstrate the coin flip analogy. This flippant energy between masculine and feminine occurs on all 7 components of time simultaneously. However, to best understand this concept, we will focus on the yearly component and 1 quadrant. Note that the blue mind and north square start the animation. Recall from the last graph that each quadrant has 3 physical and 4 spiritual influences. The outer square color correlates to the quadrant's perspective. The inner square color correlates to the mother's, father's, daughter's, and son's influence within that quadrant. Recall the primary inner cardinal directions connect adjacent quadrants. The sequence starts from north and passes through 4 spiritual and 3 physical squares before reaching east. North, orange, orange are the physical influences. Green, northeast, southeast, green are the spiritual influences. This movement from north to east is created by the feminine color sequence. From east, it passes through 4 spiritual and 3 physical squares, returning to north. East, red, red are the physical influences. Yellow, northeast, northwest, yellow are the spiritual influences. This movement from east to north is created by the masculine color sequence. It takes a sequence of 52 squares before the blue mind flips to purple. Within this sequence, north and east are highlighted 4 times, and northeast is highlighted 8 times. The animation will reset, and the 52 square sequence will repeat in all quadrants simultaneously. Recall from the seasons graph that clockwise motion relates to physical influence and counterclockwise motion relates to spiritual influence. Note the blue mind and cardinal direction start the animation. The feminine color sequence begins in a clockwise direction. It moves inward to the spiritual center. At the center, it reverses and moves outward in a counterclockwise direction. The masculine color sequence begins in a counterclockwise direction. It moves inward to the spiritual center. At the center, it reverses and moves outward in a clockwise direction. Within the feminine color sequence, the clockwise movement correlates to the orange square or the daughter's physical view. The counterclockwise movement correlates to the green square or the mother's spiritual view. Within the masculine color sequence, the counterclockwise movement correlates to the yellow square or the father's spiritual view. The clockwise movement correlates to the red square or the son's physical view. These clockwise, counterclockwise movement patterns influence each quadrant with the mother's, father's, daughter's, and son's perspectives. The cardinal directions function to balance these perspectives within their individual quadrants. The primary inner cardinal directions interconnect adjacent quadrants. Once again, it takes 52 movements per quadrant for the blue mind to flip to purple. Let's compare the 1 quadrant sequence to the 4 quadrant sequence. In the 4 quadrant sequence, the original pattern between adjacent quadrants is lost in the overlap. This synchronization doubles the number of times the cardinal directions are highlighted. In the 1 quadrant animation, they are highlighted 4 times each. In the 4 quadrant animation, they are highlighted 8 times each. We would then assume the primary inner cardinal directions would double as well, but this is not the case. When all quadrants work together, they are highlighted 15 times. 15 times for each primary inner cardinal direction totals 60. This is significant because 60 is the fundamental component of how time is organized within space. Just like the clock resets after a 60-minute sequence, the end of one mind sequence creates the beginning of the next. The minds are influenced by the direction of the masculine and feminine color sequences. They form 4 distinct patterns. These patterns are weaved together by 52 movements. The end of one pattern starts the beginning of the next. These 4 patterns create 2 blue mind perspectives and 2 purple mind perspectives before they repeat. The first blue mind creates the happy perspective. It starts with the clockwise feminine color sequence. This sequence is influenced by orange. This color correlates to the daughter's physical perspective, the octahedron, the spring season, the direction east, and the sense to taste. The first purple mind creates the angry perspective. It starts with the clockwise masculine color sequence. This sequence is influenced by red. This color correlates to the sun's physical perspective, the cube, the summer season, the direction south, and the sense to smell. The second blue mind creates the grief perspective. It starts with the counterclockwise masculine color sequence. This sequence is influenced by yellow. This color correlates to the father's spiritual perspective, the dodecahedron, the fall season, the direction west, and the sense to see. The second purple mind creates the joy perspective. It starts with the counterclockwise feminine color sequence. This sequence is influenced by green. This color correlates to the mother's spiritual perspective, the icosahedron, the winter season, the direction north, and the sense to hear. On this final graph, observe how the elements connect our inner emotions to our external senses. The Plutonic solids allow us to see the 1-quadrant and 4-quadrant patterns simultaneously. They weave these 4 quadrants into one shared reality. The 4-quadrant animation sequence is my personal favorite. To me, it represents our spiritual heart. These 4 separate chambers work in unison to connect each of us within the whole. Its rhythmic organization is the spiritual force that makes life possible. It's ironic to think that heart disease is the leading cause of death. This statistical reality correlates to our individual intentions and compartmental understanding. In truth, no compartment within this shared heart is more important than another. Each chamber of the heart is dependent on all other chambers for optimal function. This animation highlights the spiritual truth behind equality. Any intentions that create disharmony within this whole ultimately hurts us all. I hope you've enjoyed this presentation. The take-home message is that the spirit is real and absolutely everything and everyone is connected. The way we treat each other and this planet must become our primary focus. To save ourselves will require each of us to renew our minds.